Okay, well, I will call the Stormwater Utility Board meeting of June 16th to order. And the first item is roll call.
Starting with roll call, Bachhuber,
Here.
Giebert, Potter, Gnor,
Here.
Cook,
Here.
West,
Present.
Sullivan. You're muted, Mark.
Oh,
There you are.
here.
Thank you.
Okay, next item is approval of the minutes from May 19th, 2021.
So moved.
Have a
Second.
second?
Second.
Any
Bachhuber.
comments, changes, whatever? No, okay, all in favor, please say aye.
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 Aye. Minutes are approved.
Sorry, who seconded that?
And Bachhuber.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
And the next item is Pheasant Branch Stream Bank from Confluence Pond to Century Avenue, award of bid. So Rich, do you want to explain this?
Sure. The bids were opened last week, and it seemed to be, which one is this? I'm sorry. There was only two bidders for this portion of the project, and so two responsive bidders. One was Nelson. I forget the other, but we can.
Sand and gravel. Speedway.
Yeah, Speedway Sand and Gravel. Nelson Excavating had a bid of $848,253, and that was recommended by our consulting firm to accept their bid. They recently did the South Fork for us as well, over by Market Street, and they seem to have done a good job there.
Okay,
This did go to council last night and got a conditional approval, as I understand it, based on the
Yeah.
approval based on a approval coming from this committee.
correct. So any comments or a motion?
I'll move approval.
Okay,
This is
John, second.
okay, any discussion?
So just a clarification, I know there's, one of the comments was getting permits by, I think it was July or something like that. Are they already in the works for that, for getting the state and county permits?
Yes, they're in progress right now, or have been applied for. We don't have answers for that or approval yet.
No.
Also, we're working on FEMA reimbursement for this too. We don't really have that full answer yet either, but there's a number of emails that went back and forth today about getting closer to an approval from them or partial approvals. Also sending it back and forth and getting it completed in the timeline that which we described to get this project started.
Yeah.
Middle of July here. If we have to let it slide, I think we could push it to the middle of August for a start, but then we're trying to wrap up in mid-November, and that's going to push probably the bridges portion back into paving in the spring.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, any more discussion? If not, all in favor, please say aye.
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 Aye. So, opposed? Motion carries.
Okay, and I missed the second. Somebody talked over each other, so I wasn't sure who actually seconded that.
John did, I did.
Okay,
Okay. For a while, until Rich learns all our voices, say who you are. Can you make a motion or second?
thank you, Susan. I appreciate that.
Susan, I have a request. Can you just go right to number 4? Dispense with the north of Century 1 is next.
You mean just do it later?
Oh, do it now. Everybody voted for number 2. And I'm asking that we just go right to number 4, since they're the same extension
Oh,
of the
I
same.
see where you're going. Okay. Number 4, Pheasant Branch Stream Bank, north of Century Avenue, award of bid.
I'll move approval.
Okay,
I'll second Bakuber.
any discussion?
So just so everyone's aware, the same issues apply, right? Permitting and FEMA issues,
Yeah,
same kind of thing. And this is
Correct.
the later project, so this is the one that will that could potentially get pushed into next year if things don't work out.
Correct.
Correct. And who knows, they may have enough capacity to make better progress than we're expecting also.
Right.
Nelson would do both projects. That's the way this would go.
Right.
Correct.
Correct.
Yeah.
And the potential exists. I don't know if you've discussed this with them, but they're doing both projects. Is it possible that, that they can, start working on the second one simultaneous to the first? And I'm not sure what type of work, whether it's all sequential or whether they can do stuff in parallel, but
You can do some
I
things in
think part
parallel.
of it's sequential.
The potential problem with that is you want to work downstream so that anything you disturb doesn't contaminate what you've already completed. So you can't get too far ahead of yourself.
right.
And-
I understand that, but if it's possible to do some work in parallel, that might speed things up.
I agree. Having the same contractor would be beneficial in that regard.
Well, some of the same equipment will be on site, and the mob and demob hopefully is minimized and all that, so.
Correct. And I think that's probably why they're able to get both bids, is hopefully spreading it between the two, but I can't say that that's for sure.
Okay, any more discussion? Not all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Number 4 is approved. Okay, so we can go back to number 3. Pheasant Branch Stream Bank from Confluence Pond to Century Avenue, amendment number 3 to agreement for construction engineering services.
This is efforts by the contractor that designed the project to monitor and verify completion of the tasks per design. Documenting, offering the staking, documenting the locations of everything, where it should be done, the depth of the material placed, the movement of materials, and verifying that it is completed properly, and record drawings to the city afterwards. It's the most effective, cost-effective way of doing it.
Okay,
This is Mark. I'll move approval.
okay. Do we have a second?
Cook will second it.
Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Okay, so we're now to number 5. Pheasant Branch Stream Bank, north of Century Avenue, amendment number 1 to agreement for construction engineering services.
That
This
is
is
exactly the
Mark.
same.
I'll move approval.
Okay. Any discussion?
Did you get a second?
Yeah, Don
Oh,
seconded
okay,
it.
good. Okay, great.
Okay, no discussion. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? No one. Motion approved. The next item, budget item to be considered, investigation of Hidden Oak stormwater management system. So, Rich or Eric, who wants to describe this?
I think Eric is best suited to speak to this one, but I can if he doesn't want to.
Oh, I'll speak to it. So this is a 15-year-old subdivision. Houses are experiencing seepage in the basements. The conventional wisdom, I guess, at this point is that it's related to the stormwater management facilities, which are clogged and not draining. There's also a problem with county lands immediately downstream that have high groundwater since that old pump system stopped working after the 2018 floods. We're asking for fees to investigate exactly what the problem is. At least part of the problem, it seems obvious, is plugged drain tiles. So we want to go and clean out those drain tile outlets and basically see where it takes us from there. I've been out there a half a dozen times with streets crews, and we've exhausted what we can do with our own equipment. We need to go rent a roto rooter, essentially, that can get up into small diameter pipes and see how bad this tile clog problem is. So the costs are for equipment rental, backhoe, and roto rooter. And then hopefully, we'll be able to build a temporary drawdown tile entrance at each of these ponds so that we can keep the water low and minimize the problems to the neighbors while we figure out a more permanent solution.
So the money, Eric, is mainly, if I can ask, mainly not a lot of analysis. You've done some analysis here. I see the charts and graphs and whatnot, the monitoring you did, but it's the trying out this remedy that you're proposing, right?
Yeah, all that work, Jim, was done by the county, really. They
Yeah.
have set some wells essentially and are measuring the water levels.
Yeah.
The argument is there's this big pool of open water immediately downstream, and people are pointing fingers at the county. I'm not exactly sure the history of the county's involvement, but they have taken the steps to try to show what the issue is. And it's their conclusion at this point that it's probably these detention basins. Yeah, probably, but I'm not sure. If so, these things have been sitting full of water since I started working here. Are they really intended to dewater the adjacent areas or just the pond? I don't think water's seeping in either direction right now. So it's kind of we need to figure it out before we decide to rebuild this thing. Jim, I'll add, the tile system from the lower pond is about halfway submerged from the downstream water.
From tailwater, you think?
Yeah. I mean, you can go and find that tile outlet that's sitting, halfway into ponded water from the county lands.
But at that outlet, Eric, looking at this graph, isn't the tailwater still 2 feet of, there's still 2 feet of drop between there and the county ponding area, the wetland areas downstream.
Rich, can you maybe scroll a few pages down to a colorful graph that the county produced?
This is in the plan set.
Yeah, it's just after that.
Yeah, I'm trying to get there without blowing past it.
Okay.
There are two lines on that graph, Jim, that are right on top of each other.
Mm-hmm.
And
The
one
wetland.
is the lower pond or the downstream most pond. Right around elevation 923 here
Right.
below. The measurements I took when I was out there indicate they're up around 923.2. So it doesn't exactly jive with what the county is showing, but it's reasonably close.
And these are measurements at what the county called site number 4, wetland, and number 5 above berm.
So Rich, if you scroll down one more page, there should be a map.
Yeah.
So 4 is a little wetland scrape
Yeah.
immediately downstream of this pond that the county, I think, created about the same time as this development.
And
5 is all the way down by Highway 14.
right, and that water surface between 5 and 4 is basically the same for the monitoring period, right?
Right.
Yeah. It's one big pool.
The other interesting thing, Jim, these tiles are not for water quality, they're for thermal control. The county seems content to let this, what right now is like a 40-acre wet pond, just stay. I think they're having some permitting issues of their own, or maybe they haven't fully developed a plan of what they want to do. But I'm not inclined to rebuild a thermal control system when there's a 40-acre wet pond immediately downstream. So I think that can just wait until there's a little better direction on what the plans are for this, conservation land.
That makes sense.
Is this, is this near the Hideaway dump, or, the on Highway 14, is it close to that, or actually, off of, what I'm talking about?
Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
I think you're east of that. This ponded area, this wetland that we're looking at is east of that landfill that was
Okay.
in the news quite a bit. Not too far, but a ways.
The reason I ask is I still remain a little confused on where the water in question is actually coming from.
Well, the ponds are built to serve just the subdivision itself. It sits up a little bit higher than this low ground that the county owns immediately downstream.
But is that being filled by surface water or groundwater, or what?
Well, that's the big question, Jim.
Okay.
Since there's been almost no precipitation and the water in the ponds has remained, pretty stable, going down slowly as you would expect with evaporation, it's hard to tell.
Okay.
So
This is at the head of Black Earth Creek, right?
That's correct.
Is there a spring that comes up or something?
Well, there's a hill to the north of this where
Right.
Whispering Pines development is. So it could be, that there's some kind of spring type action going on.
is this text summary that was included in the packet, the Black Earth Creek headwater water level monitoring, was that written by the county?
That was written by Matt Dybel at the county.
Okay. So when he mentions in number 2 about this quick drop at OL8, possibly due to maintenance, what did the city do back in November?
Nothing. We can't figure out what would have caused that.
Oh.
We're out there at that time. It's a complete mystery to me. They did go out there and mow, but I think it was like a month before Matt noticed that precipitous drop.
Yeah. Okay.
Also, do
Anyway.
we have any historical information on when this problem started occurring? Because I don't think it was a problem for like the first 10 years of the development.
Well, I think that's kind of the other thing that are leading people to point fingers towards the county property, is that it seemed to happen simultaneously with the 2018 flood and the breakdown of the downstream pump. You know, I don't know if that's just purely perception or anecdotal evidence, or if that's the case. The subdivision was developed in phases, and it's likely that the basins were not turned over to us in a like new condition. And this problem could be solely due to construction sediments, but as far as the timing of when the subdivision was mostly stabilized versus when people started experiencing groundwater, I'm not sure. The county also surveyed the homeowners. Rich, can you perhaps show that map that Matt gave us? This is a terrain map, so you can see the two ponds, one kind of in the bottom center and one in the bottom right. The houses coated red have the worst groundwater problems.
And are those the lowest elevation,
Yeah.
or is it sort of random?
It's generally the lowest. These elevations are to be taken, they're not too precise, according to the county, maybe within a foot.
And the
Okay.
other question I'm just speculating here, but when they ask the homeowner, how often do your basement get wet? Never, only after rain, frequently, constantly. You may get different responses from different people as far as frequency.
Sure.
There's no objective way to measure that, right?
Well, I don't know how they measured this exactly,
The
Jim.
color coding, yeah,
Yeah, and I think this was the same builder throughout.
yeah.
I think that was a Viridian subdivision.
Yeah, I don't know who it was, but it's
It was
not like
Viridian.
Middleton Hills where you could blame it on different construction.
It was
No,
pretty-
it was Viridian.
Okay,
Okay.
well, I'm gonna make a motion to approve the funding for this maintenance attempt. Is there a homeowner, and I'm gonna ask a question right away, is there a homeowner association out there, and can they be informed that the city is doing something at least, so they got some hope for relief?
I think Councilman Fusard lives out there, or
Yes.
if not, he's, and there has
He
been-
lives out there.
Yeah, there's been a lot of communication with him and a couple others in the county. So as things develop, I have been trying to keep Luke posted.
Okay, so you have a motion to approve.
So I would like to make a friendly amendment to your motion. Many of you recognize my self-imposed discipline on what the utility funds can be used for. And the way that this is proposed suggests that at some point in the future, after this maintenance effort is completed, that some engineering studies be undertaken to find out what's going on. And I want to make sure everyone understands that that's not really the intent of the utility fund, that that's really an issue for stormwater, for water resources. So I would hope that you could accept an amendment to restrict this funding for just the maintenance efforts of, whether it's a backhoe or some type of rooter type equipment, to try and figure out whether cleaning out the drain tiles is sufficient to get things moving, but that any engineering work needs to get pushed off to water resources.
Or
I'll-
a capital budget
Right,
item.
I
Mark,
accept.
can we include piping, stone, material costs essentially to make a temporary fix, or no?
Yeah, I would, that's fine. I would,
Yeah,
I
good.
think that's probably acceptable. And if that's acceptable for you as a Jim, then I'll second that.
Okay, I accept that with the clarification that you provided and what Eric said about, yeah, if you can make the system, rehab it, maintain it, whatever you want to call it, but make it, and that does the trick. That releases the backwater. Well, we've done a lot to help those people out then.
Okay, any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, please say aye.
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 Opposed? Okay, motion carried.
Susan, I missed the
Yeah.
second.
What,
I missed the second.
Mark seconded it.
Mark did, thank you.
Mark? Okay. Next item is budget item to be considered Vector rental for inlet sump cleaning. So, Rich, do you want to explain this? I'm assuming that we need to clean out inlets.
Sure. In general,
Define inlet for me, please.
an inlet would be the storm sewer grate in the curb line in the general sense. And
Okay.
in there will be a pipe that is not at the bottom, so that there is a sediment bowl, if you will, to catch sediments before they go out to an outfall or into a creek where they're harder to capture. So what we're doing is we're capturing street sediments or runoff sediments in those sumps within the inlets or inlet structures. So annually we go out and try to clean as many of those as we can. In the past, we had used the utilities Vector, but as the city utility has grown, they are affording us less time because they have more sewers to jet and they have more hours of use on that, and they can't really afford to let us streets crew use that equipment. So we have
Okay.
been renting a piece of equipment to do that.
They're using the Vector for sanitary sewer cleaning.
Correct.
Okay.
Did stormwater have to pay utility for that rental of their equipment in the past?
Stormwater's, no, we don't do sanitary sewers.
Oh, I know that. No, but when you were, Richard, I think I understood correctly. You were using their equipment for storm sewer cleaning. Is that right? Storm inlet cleaning?
Yes, probably 5 years ago, or maybe 3 years ago, we started renting equipment because we couldn't free up the sanitary utilities equipment. So I don't know if there was a budget transfer to the sanitary utility from the stormwater utility. I could look into that and get you an answer, but I am not sure of that. I know that in the past 2 or 3 years, Gary had budgeted or requested funds for renting equipment. This year, we rented a much larger equipment, and they were able to clean out 233 inlets this year versus last year cleaning only 107. We are required by the WIPDES or the MS4 permit to clean these inlet sediment basins annually. So we do the best we can with the time we ever afforded. Being able to rent a piece of equipment allows us more freedom to clean out more structures, therefore saving sediment migration into the lakes or ponds.
Here's the issue that we have, and that is I believe that these inlet sump cleanings have been part of the public works budget. And if we attempt to move that expense to the stormwater utility, then technically we are required to lower our levy. So I think that's the first thing that needs to be clarified, is that if this was something that the Public Works had been doing previously, we can't transfer this expense to the utility without a corresponding decrease in our levy limit. And I don't think we ever want to do that.
No,
So I think I'm going to ask that we defer this until we can clarify that that Public Works has been paying for this in the past.
So I guess that's what I was getting at, Mark, also. So in the last few years, after, after the point in time came when sanitary couldn't make their equipment available enough for either Public Works or stormwater to clean stormwater inlets, there were several years, if I understand correctly, where this was being done still, but we don't know who was paying for it. Is that?
That's right. And I think that we need to be very careful that the stormwater utility should not, if Public Works has been paying for this, then we can't move that cost to the utility, because technically that's a transfer of levy expense to a utility, which would require a decrease in our levy.
Yeah, I would suggest the one caveat to that might be, Mark, if the stormwater is cleaning out more inlets than was available or possible with Public Works people, then that is new work being done for permit compliance. If they could do 100 in the past, now they're going to do whatever, 250 or 300. Well, that increment is a additional new work that wasn't being done before.
the increment
add
would
to
be
that.
okay, but not the original amount.
Yeah.
If I could add to that, the streets crew was performing the work with a free, if you will, rental of equipment that the city does not own. The utility owns that equipment, and through the graces of the utility, they were allowing us to use that equipment. Now they don't have the capacity to allow us to use that equipment. So the stormwater utility had been renting the equipment, but not paying for any of the labor, to my knowledge. So
Well, I think you still need to go back to the original premise, which is that Public Works was paying for this originally, right? And I understand at a convenience that stormwater may have paid for the rental. I think they probably did. Gary probably convinced us to pay for the rental, but we should have recognized that was an issue last year. But we need to make sure that if you go back 2, 3, or 4 years, that this was something that was, if this was something that Public
hang on, I
Works was
lost my
doing.
sound.
Oops, are you back?
Right. If this is something that Public Works was doing previously, that's an inappropriate transfer to the utility. So it's just a deferral, so you can find out with Bill, what and whoever else, and maybe the streets crews might know who was doing this work, say 3 or 5 years ago.
Susan, can I chime in here?
Yes,
My understanding is that the purpose of going to a referendum was so that you could avoid having to lower the levy elsewhere to make up for the stormwater utility fees.
correct.
Well, but there was an
But
issue there, right? So the original premise was that if you had something that was being levied, right? If this function was being levied, then you could not switch it to a fee for service utility without a corresponding decrease.
Unless
The
you
issue
went
is,
to
but the
referendum.
issue is that none of this work was being done. But there was a large amount of work that we're trying to do was not previously being done. So there was no question that it wasn't on the levy. But the cleanouts was something that Public
Was
Works
being-
had been doing all along. Maybe not well, maybe not in quantity, but it was a function that Public Works had been performing.
Yeah.
That's the issue.
Yeah,
right.
Eric, Public Work, we were not funding doing any maintenance on any of the large detention ponds even. We went many years without doing anything.
Okay,
No, but
And
I
that's
think
what
Eric,
sort of was the impetus to get the utility going.
yeah, I guess I don't understand then the purpose of the referendum, because I think you would have been able to, if it was all new services, my understanding back then was that then that was allowable as a new utility fee. Only if it was something that you had been doing all along. would you
No,
have
if it was something you had been doing, then the expense for that was not transferable without the corresponding decrease in levy.
Right,
But if it was all new, that would be acceptable. So when we talk about maintaining the ponds, right, whether it was the confluence pond, north pond, south pond, we weren't doing those in our pre-2012 budgets, right? That
Yep.
was the whole issue, that the utility would become the funding source to do this work. Had we been doing this type of routine maintenance in the public works budget, we would not have been allowed to do this into the utility without correspondingly decreasing the levy.
Except by going to referendum.
But referendum still would not have gotten us there, because it's the same thing with trash service, right? Although I understand they may have made a change to that, right? If you take trash collection and make it a fee for service, theoretically, or at least when Act 10 or Act 32 first came out, if you had done that, you would have to have correspondingly decreased your levy, because the service had become a fee for service activity.
Right.
So that's what we're looking at here, is that if there are stormwater functions that are being done yesterday and are funded from the levy, you can't transfer them to a utility and charge fees for it without the corresponding decrease to the levy. That's what we're trying to avoid here, right? I get the fact that if we're only doing 100 a year and the utility allows us to do 200 a year, that incremental 100 is a fully available for the utility to pay for. But the initial 100 technically is something that we would have required a levy adjustment for.
Mark, could we get Larry to weigh in on this?
Yeah, I mean, that's fine. I think that's part of the due diligence. The first thing that
I
has to
think we
happen
need
is,
to do that.
yeah, the first thing that has to happen is that we need to verify that, and I'm 99% confident that the function of cleaning out these inlets was performed by Public Works, because every year we put this in their budget, right? So I know it's there.
I'm not sure how well it was getting done, because I know the Middleton Hills outflow from our detention ponds didn't get cleaned out until
That
basically
doesn't mean
after
that
the
the money wasn't in
floods.
but that doesn't mean that the money wasn't in the budget.
that's a
Right.
different story.
It just wasn't getting done, is my point.
Again, we levied for it. Whether it got done or not, it's not relevant. There was a levy for it. And if
Yeah.
you're going to transfer those levy dollars to the utility, then you have to lower the levy.
Yeah. So we're just asking to table this till next month, when Richard or Eric or both can clarify what was being done and who was paying for it.
Right.
To
And get
what-
an
to what
opinion
level.
from the city
Yeah, I think
attorney.
it's more important to understand who was paying for it.
Yeah.
And I think if you have a line item for this in the public works budget, then we just need to be very careful on what we do, on how we do it.
So is this a table or a
No, a deferral.
Deferral.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so who seconded the deferral?
Well, I'll second. This is Cook.
Okay.
I'll second that.
Do we have any further discussion?
Richard, when does this work normally get done? I know it's probably when the crews are available, but when Is that normally a fall, a spring, a summer? When does that happen?
It's typically a spring event. Fall, they're pretty busy with leaf collections and such, and so they don't have time to gather to get that done. So my understanding is it is a spring event.
All right. So deferring this a month is not gonna put a big dent in your schedule or crew
No.
schedule?
No, I don't think so. I think the work has already been completed for this year.
Yeah, okay.
Okay. Then all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? The deferral is approved. Next item is switch the order of SWAB and water resource meetings.
Some of this comes from how the actions or recommendations from the Water Resources Committee over to SWAB. With SWAB going ahead of the Water Resources meeting, that generally causes us like a month's delay in getting back to the SWAB to have an approval for that process. Now, that said, there are things that go the other direction as well. And when we craft the agenda, we would put dual agenda items on in such a way that if the Water Resources Commission did recommend something, it would already be in the agenda to react to the previously recommended agenda item from the Water Resources half hour earlier.
This is probably a topic not going to resolve tonight, but is there any opportunity here, and I've been wondering about this since we started these sessions, to combine water resources and SWAB? I don't think there's a legal requirement to be separate, and there's so much overlap in the topics of discussion and membership for that matter.
Right. Well, Jim, that's what happens. We do personnel and finance get combined at council, or personnel and finance committees are done as a combined meeting, and each entity votes separately on the issue.
But only when there's joint topics.
That's
And
correct.
I don't know that is there enough overlap to do that every week, every meeting? And my sense is probably not, right? So
It could be done in a way, if Rich really worked at it, where the items that need both committees to respond to are on the agenda first. And we get through those, and then SWAB can adjourn and Water Resources can continue.
I see that as a plausible approach to the problem.
And that's actually what you do with personnel and finance.
right.
I mean, tonight, we're already 15 minutes into the water resource meeting. I don't know if people are online or not, but this
Yeah, I
does
think,
happen.
yeah.
No, we
Maybe we
pushed it
should-
back till 7.
Oh, you did?
Yeah,
Well, my apologies, but nonetheless.
Point
I
Yeah, I
think
think-
that's a factor as well, right? If you're trying to do these sequentially, that there's so much probability that water resources will run into SWAB or vice versa. I don't know that SWAB has ever run into water resources. That's the thing I would be concerned about having them reversed.
Could we do them together with SWAB Water Resources items specifically at the beginning?
I'm willing to try anything, Susan, and see how it works. I don't know that there's an answer for this whole difficulty. I don't think there's one.
Or the alternative is have SWAB meet a week or two later than Water Resources on a different night.
I know there are other cities, municipalities that do have one commission that covers both of these issues, these responsibilities. And I assume they're not in violation of any.
Right. That's just not how our stormwater utility was set up.
All right. All right, I give it my best.
Okay,
So,
so do we have suggestions?
Maybe we should
Or-
just do this on a trial basis. Right, to see if you can do joint meetings and get the combined agendas done up front.
Right,
I think that's worth a try.
I would
Otherwise, I
agree.
think you're stuck with doing them, either separate nights in the same week or a week difference between the two.
So you're suggesting joint meeting for the topics that are common between the two committees?
right,
yes.
Right. So then the
With-
question becomes, what happens if there are uncommon items? You're gonna have to have a meeting separately anyway. Right?
Sure, yes.
So as an example, coming up in a month to 2 months, we're gonna have to have a budget discussion, which should be done separately from water resources. So that's an example of where we're gonna have uncommon agendas.
How about we reserve the right to have the ability to call a joint meeting when 50% of the agendas are common or better,
Well,
Well,
what
whatever
you-
their common items.
right?
yeah, I don't have, so I'm not suggesting we don't do this. What I'm suggesting is that this won't be the panacea, right? We're still gonna have to have a separate meeting for our uncommon items. And
Yes,
so that's the issue that has to get resolved. And that's what I'm saying. Maybe what we try and do is for the rest of the summer is attempt to do this common meeting. And we'll just have to determine whether or not the uncommon items are worthy of a meeting.
I like that approach, just to give it a shot.
Do we need a motion on this?
Well, I suppose we gotta get water resources to agree to it also, right?
Yeah,
So we,
well, I mean, I think we've thrown out suggestions and water resources needs to chime in,
right,
and we'll just say we've discussed it.
yeah.
Okay. Next item is preference for return to in-person meetings or continued remote meetings. I am going to say, I think we should continue remote meetings for at least a couple months until things get even more under control. Especially since we would have to meet in conference room B, which is way too small to get the number of people we've got. And we have a lousy air handling system, or an old one.
So do I hear you'd like to defer this until September?
Yes,
I'll make that motion. Actually, it might be better just to table it. I'll move that we table this until sometime in September.
I think that's a good idea. I'll second that. We do not want to rush ahead too fast and then have to go back. It's basically my opinion.
So Rich, just so you are aware, in order to bring this back, there has to be a motion to untable it. And then we would have to calendarize it for the next meeting.
Oh, you can't bring it back on the table and vote the same meeting?
No,
Is that
the
right?
only thing we can do is to vote to bring it back. It has to be
Alright.
agended, calendared for a different meeting as
Yeah.
well.
Okay,
So
Well, maybe
in-
the issue is, let's do it this way. Let's defer it till September. That way you can put it on the agenda in the September meeting.
Right. I think
that,
that's,
So we're deferring this to a September agenda. Is that right?
Correct.
All right.
which means we're going to stay virtual until then.
Correct. That saves all of us a lot of travel time,
Oh, yeah.
especially Rich.
But that's not my issue. That's not your issue. That's my issue.
I know. I'm just trying to be accommodating.
Well,
And
I
I'm not
certainly
sure
do.
where Eric lives.
I certainly do appreciate that, and thank you.
Okay, so we have a motion to defer it until
Defer.
September. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay, the motion carried. So we'll stay on Zoom until September. Or actually, the September meeting would be on Zoom too.
Yeah, I think October would be your first possibility
Right.
of
And
live.
hopefully by then we'll have a better understanding of how everything is going. So,
For me, this is easy. It's clean. We get to make a recording of it without
I mean,
having,
there's some real pluses.
there are certainly some pluses to it, and having the ability to record this and go back and review parts just to make sure I didn't miss something or mess up writing some of the minutes down. Having that tape available for me is pretty important. But
Well, it also, pardon me, makes it easier for the public to participate.
Yes.
They can.
And we can, I'm assuming we can still do a hybrid where we're in person and it's still being Zoomed for other people who want
I
Get in
think
there.
there's some technology issues, Jim.
to.
Susan's
But-
correct. They're working on those issues now with IT and the company that films the plan commission meeting and staff and city council meetings now. So not jumping into that feet first might save us some headaches of the growing pains. We can let some
Okay.
other do that.
Is anybody meeting in person right now?
I don't think just yet, as I understand it, the first meeting of July for the council is going to be hybrid.
Okay.
That was the directive, I think, that the city council put forth to get it accomplished by then.
Anything else? Not,
Adjourned.
we are adjourned.
All
All
right.
right, thank
Thank you,
you.
everyone.
Thank you.
See you soon.
Okay, so we've got to log back in for water resources.